Yeah. Right. Good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Mapledurham Playing Fields Trustees Subcommittee of the 7th of April 2022. I'll do some introductions. My name is Councillor Debs Edwards. I'm chair of this, and we have Chris Brooks.
Councillor, are you?
Yeah.
Ben Stainsby.
Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, it's Rachel Eden. Sorry, I'm dialing in because I'm not COVID positive anymore, but I'm COVID recovering. So,
wish you the best. Wish you the best. Just a clarification, Simon. If it comes to voting, can Councillor Eden vote? No. Okay. We also have Councillor Ballston, who will be making a statement later on. This is an added part of the agenda at item 6. Right. Any declarations of interest? I take that as a no. We have the minutes of the meeting from the 10th of February 2020. Hey, over 2 years. Welcome, everybody. Can I sign these as a correct record? Thank you, councillors. Are there any petitions or questions? No. Okay. Let's go to item 4, which is the Mapledurham Playing Fields accounts and update on works undertaken and services operating. This report represents the Mapledurham Playing Fields revenue accounts for 2021, provides an update on the reopening of the pavilion in September 2021 and the near completion of the landscape improvements to the playing fields, and seeks authority to complete 4 proposed pieces of work. I will ask the lead officer, Ben Stainsby, to introduce and to talk on this.
Thank you, Chair. As the report identifies, the pavilion opened in September last year, and that was with support of Borough and contributions from some of the other clubs using the facilities towards kitchen equipment and what have you, which was very welcome. The opening was delayed somewhat by various rounds of COVID restrictions and trying to resolve some water leaks within the car park area, but we are now open and operating. Similarly, since the last meeting, the vast majority of the landscape improvements have actually been completed, and these have been very well received by the vast majority of people using the grounds, and it is supporting significantly greater use of the field than had previously been witnessed. There are 1 or 2 photographs at the back of this report that just show some of the bits that we have undertaken. And I'd just like to move on to, I think, some of the points where I'm looking for approval or endorsement from the subcommittee. We had one of the few items left to complete are improvements to the entrance onto Chasey Road within the woodland area. We have previously had authority from this committee to undertake the works, and we are proposing to complete those this summer. It's also really nice that we're getting some very constructive interaction with the Heights School, and one of the elements that we had wanted to include within the pavilion but was proving quite costly was introduction of Wi-Fi, but the provision of hard telephone lines to support that were relatively expensive, and the Caversham Heights School have offered us the ability to tap into their broadband and their Wi-Fi system. So we are therefore looking to extend that into the pavilion. The costs of that are identified within the financial section of the report, but this will cost us about £1,500 with very little ongoing costs, which, as I said, is significantly less than a standalone system. We are also looking to install 2 CCTV cameras into the area around the pavilion. One covering the car park, where we have had periodic complaints from neighbours suffering principally from noise nuisance and some other disturbance. We've also had 1 or 2 complaints or concerns raised about potential antisocial behaviour within the car park, and we also have a concern that the rear of the pavilion is not well overlooked, and the introduction of a second CCTV camera as a preventative measure would be useful. Now, we're looking to include those into the council's central monitoring station, which means that should there be any problems, one, that there'll be recordings that are easy to access by both council and police, and should there be a request for sort of immediate imagery or what have you from the police, that can also be provided. In order to do that, the cost is significantly more than standalone cameras. So we're looking at the request is to spend £24,000 on that, but it does give us a high level of assurance that we will be able to deal with issues that arise. There's also I think within the report there was a request to fund additional acoustic panels in the pavilion should they be required. We've undertaken trials with some panels that have already been provided by the school, and the conclusion is that we need to essentially double the amount of panels that we've got. So we provided 6 by the school, we need to purchase another 6, which is about another £2,000. And lastly, within the report is laid out the accounts for the last 2 years that have been submitted to the Charity Commission, along with the detail of the spend for the last financial year. That takes me to the end of the report, and if anybody has any questions, I'll happily answer.
Thank you, Mr Stainsby. Questions to Mr Stainsby? Comments? Yes, Councillor Ayub.
Just a quick, perhaps I've just missed it. You know, there's CC camera and all that you're going to install. What about afterwards services and repairs? Will the school be liable for maintenance, or was it the council maybe was going to be for the upkeep?
So, thank you, Chair. The council will be responsible for the 2 cameras that focus on the areas that are managed by the trust. The school have another set of cameras that they are responsible for looking after, and they are on a school system that is all the recordings are held locally. So that will be a revenue burden to the council.
Councillors, any other queries, questions, remarks? No? Well, I think this is an absolutely fantastic report. I can see the how the school is really embedding within the community and doing some really good work with the pavilion, offering acoustic boards and also their Wi-Fi, and really making a difference to the whole, to both not only to the school's relationship with the local community, but helping out, which is wonderful. The photographs, I just think, are unbelievable. I've been up there and wow, what a difference. What a difference. And also, it's so free for people to walk in. It's a fantastic park. The planting of the trees, the pathways and everything makes such a big difference. And I'm absolutely delighted, and I expect parents whose children are at the school are delighted as well. It's a wonderful place to visit, and I ask anybody who hasn't been, please go and have a look. Fantastic, peace and quiet, brilliant. So as far as the recommended action is, I will read each one out and I expect to vote. Recommended action, it's on page 7 on 2.1, that it is noted that the pavilion is now open following completion of the rebuilding works to the pavilion, along with support from Warren and District Residents Association and users in equipping the kitchen. Agree? Agree. That the subcommittee note that the landscape works are now largely complete. Some final work to pitches is required over the next 5 years and to the entrance of Chasey Road this summer. Agree? That the improvements previously authorised and budgeted for the Chasey Road entrance be undertaken this summer as identified in point 4.3.1. Agree? That the offer from Caversham Heights Primary School to allow the pavilion to piggyback on their broadband connection be accepted, to install equipment to extend the school's public Wi-Fi network as identified in point 4.3.2. Agree? 2.5. That 2 CCTV cameras linked into the central monitoring station be installed, covering the car park entrance and rear of pavilion as described in point 4.3.3. Agreed. That additional acoustic panels be installed in the pavilion should they be required as identified in 4.3.4. That the submission of accounts to the Charity Commission be noted. Agreed. Thank you very much. Let's move on to item 5, deed of dedication update, which is, it was to follow, so it's page 31. I pass this over to Mr. Brooks to outline.
Thank you very much, Chair. Members of the subcommittee will remember that it seems a long time ago now, but back in February 2020, shortly before COVID struck and the lockdown occurred, this subcommittee considered the deed of dedication and it considered it appropriate and it effectively accepted a recommendation that officers were authorised to go away, complete that deed of dedication. There was an element, though, of doubt of how quickly that could be completed, because Ben Sainsbury was in negotiation with both Caversham Trents and at that time Wadra, who were looking for some interest in land. Wadra, I think, were at that time talking about placing a container on the recreation ground, but we certainly were working to try and regularise the storage area, and that was ongoing, and that was the reason why that wasn't perfected as per the minute. So COVID struck in 2021. Wadra issued a letter or an email to members of the subcommittee, and they produced a very materially amended deed of dedication. That deed of dedication was very restrictive, totally restrictive in what was envisaged under the deed of dedication. Now, just to remind the committee, Fields in Trust specifically in their guidance recommend latitude, flexibility in deeds of dedication. And the document, which is Appendix 1, which is the agreed deed of dedication as per 2020, February 2020, that had taken the precedent Fit for All Fields in Trust document, and it had actually tightened it up. So there'd been quite a considerable tightening exercise to afford greater protection to the recreation ground, which is what officers were tasked to do. And that negotiation, that discussion went on between myself, the expert charitable solicitors, Veal Wasborough, and Fit for All. So that's the background to the approval by this subcommittee of that deed of dedication. So the document proffered by Wadra were effectively ignoring that guidance, and the principal thinking behind it was effectively to stop any further development, to stop new buildings, to stop the replacement of buildings. It went as far as actually prohibiting the use of the recreation ground by the school, which was a fascinating amendment, bearing in mind both the lease and the community use agreement afforded the school use of a playing field, which was part of our negotiation that Ben Stainsby had followed. So that didn't tie up. Now, that was a gross example where it didn't work, but nevertheless, it was very, very tight. Now, I acknowledge, and I think the members of the subcommittee need to acknowledge, that there is still great concern by some of the residents and some of the people in the area that the council has a hidden agenda, that actually it tends to develop out the green spaces. And that, I think, is a concern to whatever degree that sits behind this deed of dedication that they have proffered. So what occurred was the members of the subcommittee received a clean draft, which actually was difficult to work out where the amendments were being made. But some of the amendments were so obvious it was put out. So what you've got in front of you tonight is that draft that was actually produced to you, but it's actually got all the amendments marked up. So it is important that you just consider those amendments and be aware of the magnitude. And what much of this would do would be tie the hands of the subcommittee. Potentially, it could tie the hands of the subcommittee to act with its charitable responsibilities. So that is why in due course I will be saying what I'm saying about what I consider and what officers consider in this report that the subcommittee should do. This document arrived, or the document arrived in late September. On the 13th of October, there was a management committee. So there was an opportunity to get the views of the management committee on the amended draft. And members of the committee will see that the matter was considered, that the minutes are in effect reproduced. But you'll see what was resolved at that management committee. Firstly, the management committee were not prepared to support the document in its current form, and that was specifically minuted because one of the other actions was that I was to go away, meet with Wadra and either Veal Wasborough, but also their solicitors. And the thinking behind that and the discussion at the management committee was, well, this has been produced. What is the thinking? What is the greater thinking behind this document? What is the evidence that may well inform the subcommittee as to why there is such great concern? So that meeting took place on the 28th of February, so not that long ago. At that meeting, I don't consider that any substantial evidence was produced, but what an alarming not necessarily allegation, but a belief that was put forward was that actually in disposing of the school, which was a site of 1.231 acres, which I'm sure the subcommittee will have ingrained in them, and to establish that, the subcommittee and the trustees have had to follow very strict charitable law and produce a property report, and you've all seen that, and that's been the belief was that it wasn't 1.231 acres, but it was closer to 2.5 acres had been lost, which was, I think, a remarkable belief. But no further substantiation was put forward in the meeting that Ben Stainsby and I attended. What came out, though, was this genuine concern that there was the likelihood of future development. And that, I think, does exist. Wadra, Martin Brommel, who attended the meeting, Eliza Miles, and they actually had their solicitor there, that there is this genuine feeling. However, what I think needs to be appreciated, and it was explained, was that, the Charity Commission offers protection. It may not be viewed as acceptable to those people, to Wadra, but it is nevertheless protection. There are some very strict hoops to jump through and law to follow, but equally Fields in Trust, and I repeat their objects, and it's worthwhile just reading out just so that we're very clear that what Fields in Trust objects to provide and maintain and to promote and assist in the provision of maintenance of playing fields, recreation grounds, playgrounds, open spaces and other facilities for play and recreation for the benefit of both the community at large and of persons who by reason of their youth, age, infirmity, disablement, poverty or social or economic circumstances have special needs for facilities with a view to improving their conditions. Now, the purpose I put that in the report and the purpose I put that to Wadra was just to re-emphasise strongly that the recreation ground isn't there to deliver for any particular group. It is to deliver those objects. Now, Fields in Trust, in proffering the deed of dedication, is saying, here's an extra protection. That is what is being offered here. It is additional protection on top of the protection that the recreation grounds, being a registered charity and an object within a registered charity. So that is very important to have in your minds, that actually in entering into the deed of dedication, which is stronger than their general precedent, then greater protection is being afforded, whilst delivering flexibility, because that's important too. So just finally moving on, at the recent management committee, Wadra had produced an email which I think the members of the committee have got from Martin Brommel, and there was a presentation in support of Wadra's amended draft. And you will see from the email, and the presentation was used a lot of this information, but you'll see from the email, and again, it's important that you acknowledge what Wadra are offering. Wadra, in its genuine belief, wish to protect the recreation ground to a greater degree, but Wadra aren't the trustees. Reading is the trustees, and you as the subcommittee act on behalf of that function. So what Wadra are saying is they believe that actually when working out any possibility of future development, and we've got a figure of 4%, this is after the school has been, that actually this additional land that's been lost is made up, and it's there under one land use. It's made up of what they call orphan land, which is the land between the school car park and the boundary to your right as you go into the Mapledurham car park. So it's to your right. And it's a section of land, but it's still within the trust control. And in fact, I think it's an overflow car park, that is, which Reading uses. Land lost because of the central lighted access area. Now, the trustees subcommittee will know that access area across the recreation ground was not only one of the major recreational facilities that were delivered as a result of Section 106 and other monies received consideration, but not only that, but it's actually actively used and is very popular as a recreational facility. Land taken up by the Mugger Steps is something that's happened. The Mugger Steps are a series of steps just coming out from the Mugger onto Reading land. But the reason that Ben Stainsby, as the leisure manager, requested those is from a point of health and safety, that there is a second means of access and egress to that Mugger. Now, I've answered the challenge on that, and that is acceptable that that is on recreational land. So it's not lost, it's actually facilitating. Land annexed to Caversham Trents, well, that actually existed before the school was even built. So that's historical, but it's historical as something that we are perfecting and we will need to conclude. And then there is the final suggestion that actually the amount of land disposed of was greater than 1.231 acres. So that at least was the explanation as to how the belief that 2.5 or twice the area had been disposed of. And much of that actually does not have a great deal of merit. And that was being put forward to say, actually, whatever that amounts to, deduct it from the 4%. Now, as I say, I go back to my initial point, the draft that was considered by the subcommittee, and I would recommend that we go with that, but nevertheless, have those points in your mind when you make your decision. And then there was a suggestion, and this comes from, this is under 2 definition. There was a suggestion that well, what actually is a recreation ground? What do you expect to be on a recreation ground? Do you expect it to have buildings? Do you expect it to have facilities? And this is an attempt to define actually what can go on that ground thereafter in the future. And the definition is informal recreation and leisure use. But you'll see from the definition that is proffered that what it does is it effectively is a very tight definition. And what it says, their view, is that it means activities by members of the community which are unstructured, not related to clubs or organisations, require no pre-booking, no built structure, payment of fees, supervision, etc. And it goes on to give an illustration, which it would effectively mean that an artificial pitch would not be acceptable to be built there. And as you know from previous reports, that is an aspiration. It is an aspiration of Caversham Trent should they get the sufficient funding from Sport England, and it is an aspiration to make match funding available. But nevertheless, any decisions of that ilk will fall to the subcommittee, to you as trustees, to consider whether that is an appropriate expansion of recreational facilities. And that may well be if that ever does come to pass, that might be a difficult decision. So that is where we've got to, and I'm apologise for going on, but what I wanted to just ensure that you were clear what representations had been made by WADRA, that you are aware of them, that you've considered them, and in making your decision. And as I say, the recommendation asks you to note and reaffirm that earlier decision of 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Questions, councillors? Comments? Yes, Councillor Wynne.
Sorry, do you want to just use the microphone so we can?
Sorry. Is that it? They've put all these what they want in the deed of dedication, but it actually seems like it's muddy in the waters in a way. It's not plain sailing, is it?
I think what the driver behind it, or what the outcome is a highly restrictive document. Is with very little flexibility, and it's not appropriate for the trust, in my opinion, as the legal advisor, and Veal Wasborough's opinion as our expert legal advisors on charities. It is not appropriate to accept those amendments.
Councillor Singh, Councillor Eel, have you anything to add? No, yes, Councillor Eden.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm aware I'm unfortunately not able to vote this evening, but reading this report and listening to the very helpful comments from Mr. Brooks, I do feel that we should probably give more regard to our duties as trustees in a wider sense, because obviously the playing field should be for the benefit of the whole community. And I do think Wardrow have got some genuine concerns and some genuine useful input on that. But obviously the whole community, there's going to be a divergence of views. And I think we should try not to restrict ourselves, not because I don't think that there should be any, major development of this site in any way. I think, it's already had this change with the school coming through, but I think that we ought to be able to look at things on its merits and consider things for the whole community. That's my view of it, and I think that the recommended actions and the comment that are in the report kind of give us that ability to give due regard to our duties as trustees, rather than kind of prejudging and preempting things. And I also think we need to be careful not to see any facilities that are put on that have been put on that land as automatically being a loss of recreation. I think the good examples of, for example, the access. I mean, that to me, I would say enhances, the access to the community. And I know Councillor Balston's comments about people being able to access it who have disabilities or access needs has been enhanced by some of the works that have gone on. That to me suggests that it's not a detriment to the playing field. So I think, in short, I would be supportive of the recommendations from the officers.
Thank you, Councillor Eden. Having sort of noted what Mr. Brooks has just said, and having read what Wardrow has suggested, I find this is a little too tight, rather prohibitive to accept these changes and this new type of deed of dedication. Doesn't fit with what, as the chair and obviously as and representing the members of the subcommittee, it doesn't fit with what we have to do. We are trustees of the playing fields. We have worked very, very hard to make sure that it is open and it is free, and we have with Mr. Stainsbury's and Mr. Brooks' help and others to renovate and update it, and it has vastly improved, and we want to keep it open to everybody of Reading. I do find that the Wardrow suggestion is really not negotiable. It doesn't fit with we as trustees of the subcommittee at all. It would find in 5 years, whatever, that even putting a lick of paint on the pavilion would be prohibitive, and that is just not where Reading goes. So the recommended item, also the lost acres. Sorry, no, that's my point. And no, there's no lost acres. It's all improved the whole area, as I said in my introduction. Therefore, I'm going straight to the recommended action, and I will read it out. 2.1, that the subcommittee notes the current position, in particular paragraph of 4.2 of this report, and also the response dated 24th of March 2022 by Martin Brommel on behalf of Wardrow, as set out at Appendix 3. 2.2, that the subcommittee reaffirms the decision of the Trustees subcommittee of its meeting of the 10th of February 2020. Can I have a vote, please? All in agreement? Please show your hands. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 6, which is Councillor Balston, you would like to make a statement.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to me to make a statement. I'll start by sharing feedback on the completed works at Mapledurham playing fields. I've heard much praise for the vastly improved accessibility to which Councillor Eden just referred, which has opened up the playing fields to wheelchair users. Now, mobility impaired grandparents are able to enjoy watching their grandchildren play football, and children's buggies and wheelchairs are able to reach the new playground. Added to this, the lighting up of the central avenue, together with the fact that there are more people about, has made residents feel safe to walk their dogs alone. The pavilion's major rebuild and partial refurbishment has transformed it beyond recognition into a fabulous facility for everyone. A few finishing touches still need doing. You've already discussed and approved the buying and installation of soundproofing panels, plus the need for more kitchen storage, but the building is nearly there. Some residents who originally opposed the building of the school have changed their minds. They've acknowledged the massive benefits achieved. As trustees, I hope you will be as pleased as I am that this highly controversial project has been such a tremendous success. We, along with officers, can all hold our heads up high. I'd like to turn now to the meeting I chaired on Tuesday the 29th of March of the Mapledurham Playing Fields Management Committee, at which we discussed officer reports about the playing fields and pavilion. Madam Chair, as you will be aware, the following organisations each have a representative on the Management Committee: Caversham Lawn Tennis Club, Caversham Trents Football Club, Mapledurham Parish, the Heights Primary School, user groups and Wadra. In addition, the Council has 3 councillors, including me, on the committee. 3 officers were present to support the committee, one of whom took the minutes. I have had confirmation back from the majority that my recollection and account of the meeting is correct. One of the topics discussed was rental charges, including the charges to Wadra for use of the pavilion for their Thursday afternoon community cafe. Wadra appeared to have taken for granted that, unlike all the other voluntary user groups of the pavilion on the discounted community rate, they are entitled to its free use. The Council does have a process for groups to apply for funding, and I have provided this to Wadra. The community cafe is in itself a good thing, and I hope they are successful with their application. Tonight, to set the record straight and to correct the inaccuracies and misunderstandings that some on social media have displayed, I set out the facts. Point 1. Because the representative of Caversham Trents Football Club was unable to attend, I read out the statement he had sent me in advance, expressing support for the principle of Wadra being given a fee reduction / waiver for the community cafe, but said that Wadra should provide attendance numbers and look at funding opportunities. Hardly a misrepresentation or misinterpretation of Caversham Trent's position. Point 2. There was no vote. There was no vote on whether to waive the charges or otherwise. Instead, it was noted that Wadra had believed they were getting free usage, but that hadn't been officers' understanding. It was agreed that officers would investigate further the exact situation and evidence in terms of what had been agreed to be charged and come back to the next management meeting with options for resolving the situation. Following the meeting, there have been several posts on this topic on Caversham's social media. Specifically, I am alleged to have misrepresented the views of Caversham Trents Football Club, while committee members and I are alleged to have voted against Wadra getting free usage of the pavilion, resulting in closure of their community cafe. These allegations grossly misrepresent both the proceedings and the outcome. I ask that you note my statement, which is corroborated by the relevant section of the initial draft minutes that I forwarded to you in advance of this meeting. In closing, it's obviously very disappointing, indeed a matter of great regret, that some posts online have chosen to criticise my handling of the committee meeting and to denigrate me and other members of the committee. Now that the facts are in the public domain, inaccurate posts should cease. I reserve my right to institute legal proceedings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Balston. On your point 2, I hope that officers will be able to supply information to WADRA. Also, I suggest if WADRA would like to apply via RVA, perhaps to get some funding to run the cafe. I think that should be suggested to them as well. And I also am very disappointed that you have been treated in this sort of way, and I hope this never ever happens again. Thank you. Any other comments from councillors? Yes, Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Chair, and sorry to hear what you have to go through. I know, but most of the time, I think people forget that we have to follow Knowles' principle, which is about accountability, integrity, and also objectivity. And that's our framework to work as councillors. We cannot go by intuition, our own judgments, or political views. We have to be in that framework to when we are making decisions. Sometimes it's against our gut feeling, but we have to be very objective about that. And I'm really sorry to hear that, because when we think about councillors, they're also mothers and daughters, they're also sons and fathers. So we are part of the community, and we had to make a lot of sacrifices to do the work we do for the community, but we do it for the passion of it. And I have nothing to say more than feeling sorry in this situation, and yeah, hopefully the community will, the committee will do support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Any other comments from any of the? Thank you, Councillor Balston, and thank you, Councillor Eden. Do you wish to make any comments, Councillor Eden? No. Thank you very much. Well, that's a closure to this meeting, and thank you all for attending, and I wish you all well and COVID-free. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good night.